Greetings, viewer. It is I, Hilariously Scary, and today, we're going to be talking about what to do when you realize that you're falling out of love with your characters or story or whatever. Or as I like to call it, whenever you get really darn sick of your dang characters. I get this comment a lot of people being like, how do you stay with your story? How have you continued developing the same story for years? And normally what I tell them is just like, I don't really know. I just found a story that I thought was fun to write, and I just kept writing it. It was just very self-indulgent, and then I got to know the characters, and I really liked the characters, and I don't know, I found this universe where I could like just explore all these weird little nooks and crannies, so I never really got bored. But the truth of the matter is, sometimes I do get really sick of my story, and I do like kind of not want to write it anymore, because I mean, not really, like it never is like, oh gosh, I don't want to ever touch the story again, but sometimes I can get really sick of my characters. Specifically, my main OC, Philip. My main OC used to be Desponia, and I never really thought about her. I would always be like, oh, intelligence and deduction and knowledge and all these other characters. But right now, my main OC is Philip, and I have to actually develop him a lot because I'm writing a little series of short stories about him. His little group in time at the ARI, which, you know, it's on my Patreon. I talk about it pretty much every video just because I'm so excited about it. But sometimes whenever I'm thinking about Philip for so long, and I'm developing his backstory, and I'm like coming up with all these things for him, and like I get really bored and really tired, and I'll just be like sitting there listening to, because I write to music, and specific songs will go to different characters, and I'll be listening to a Philip song and be like, ooh, poor Philip, everybody you ever loved died or abandoned him, like, oh no, now I'm gonna go kill a bunch of people. Like, get over yourself, dude. Like, gosh, like, learn to just deal with depression like the rest of us. And I just get like so sick of this character. I'm like, why did I write this? What am I doing with my life? This is the worst. I'm so sick of you, Philip. And like, I genuinely like don't want to write about Philip for like a good long time. I feel like if I didn't have such a long connection with this story, I would easily drop the story in one of these moods. And I'm starting to wonder if I just like get in this mood around this time, because like 2 years ago I was talking about characters you hate or characters you don't really like with Lucid, and then the next year I was like, hey, here's how I fix that, and now I'm like back to being like, I'm sick of my freaking characters. So basically, what happens whenever I get in one of these moods where I'm like, I just kind of hate everything about my story. Well, not everything, but you know, I just get sick of it. I get bored. I'm like, ugh, this is terrible. I just kind of take a step back and I look at a different story. And normally I don't look at a completely different story. Every now and then, my brain will be like, you've been thinking about the Overseers for too long, so I'm gonna give you a dope dream, and then you can focus on what that dream presented instead. And I have been getting some pretty dope dreams lately, but I've been focusing instead on these two lovely little characters that I'm drawing right now. This is Vicky and Remy. Gonna address the Remy thing later. I'll come back to me on that. But Vicky and Remy are technically part of the Overseers universe, but they take place so far in the future of the Overseers that, like, well, not so far. This is like end-game ships. They're children. So like these two beings are the children of some of the main characters, and I made a rule for myself that I'm not allowed to make grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, because I will just go off for like generations. I caught myself the other day nearly dipping into great-grandchildren territory because I've gotten to love the grandchildren so much, and I'm like, no, I'm putting my foot down. We're not gonna do this. So my story is kind of a generational story. So like you have Desponia and you have her story, and then you have Philip and you have his story. So it's already got the like, I'm showing you the parent story and the children's story, that I can't like fit it in my story to also develop this big crazy thing for the grandchildren. And then if I develop this big crazy thing for the grandchildren, I'm gonna give them great-grandchildren, and then if I develop the great-grandchildren, it becomes too much story really fast. Like, it's already too much story, but this is like, okay. But that's why I have that rule where I'm not allowed to make grandchildren OC, great-grandchildren OC. I already caved and made grandchildren OC. So I'm not gonna tell you who their parents are, because that's spoiler, because I don't want to spoil the in-game ships. I feel like it's kind of obvious for one of them, if you know him. Also, I don't know what's going on with Remy's hair either. I always draw him when he's a baby. I've drawn him like 3 times, and he was like 13 in all of them. So trying to draw him as like a young adult is like, I don't know what I'm doing. This doesn't look right. In the end, I just gave him a beanie and called it a day. Basically, my advice for if you're sick of your characters, just take a break and come back. So I'm gonna talk about how I've been taking a break from Philip. to talk about these beans, because I probably shouldn't talk about these beans, but gosh darn it, I love them. So Vicky and Remy, their story takes place in the early 2010s, late 2000s, because since it's officially 2020, I suggest that we move past 80s. We've been in the 80s for too long. We skip over the 90s. We were already there with the hair clips. Let's just go straight to the late 2000s and get me like some scene kids, some freaking, I know that emo was really more early 2000s, but like this is romanticizing a decade. Like we don't care about accuracy. So Vicky has her little like scene haircut. She's got her dramatic makeup. She's got her flip phone, and they're supposed to be at college together. But instead they just party and rave all the time. That's another thing. They're supposed to be like at a rave. I've never been to a rave. I don't know. I was just watching a bunch of Kesha videos, trying to figure it out. I know that they're supposed to have like 18 layers of jewelry on, but I've been opting for a more thinner line art style lately, and for somebody who doesn't like to do line art, like the only thing I really like to do is shade and color things, but the line art, it looks so much crisper if you have it thinner, but it just takes so long, so I just didn't have the patience to do jewelry. So I'm sorry the drawing is officially inaccurate. I would have loved to give them like glow sticks or whatever. Yay, keeping my New Year's resolution of taking art less seriously, I guess. Vicky and Remy, they grew up together. Their parents were friends, so you know, they were friends. It's one of those relationships where like when they were kids, they're like, let's get married when we're older. And then whenever they grew up, Remy was like, hey, do you want to date? And Vicky was like, okay, sure, why not? But then like they were constantly like on and off, and they would like get together, and then they'd be like, oh wait, I hate you, and break up, and then they'd be like, oh no wait, I can't find anybody better, and get back together. Like the relationship is like, okay, if I were to put the relationship into two words, it would be sad and complicated, because they've got like this really interesting dynamic where like they don't really love each other, but they don't really hate each other, and they definitely don't like each other, but they definitely like kind of secretly love each other, but it not in the tsundere like, ooh, it's not like I like you or anything. More like the sad couple that's been married for 50 years, and like the wife is flirting with other guys at the bars to try to get her husband's attention, but the husband just like does not care. But like they still care about each other enough to like pay for each other and buy each other stuff and like tolerate each other, but like the young love connection was never really there. And like that's kind of how they act. It's so weird, because like I honestly can't make up my mind as to whether or not I ship them, because like I want to ship them, but at the same time like they don't really love each other, but they do kind of love each other. I don't know how to describe it. Do y'all know what I'm getting at? I feel like what's going on here is that both of them believe in true love, and they believe that they can only find it with each other. So like Vicky believes that there's gonna be like some guy that's gonna sweep her off her feet and be able to actually have an intellectual conversation with her. I know she doesn't look like it, but she's very smart, and like actually be able to like match her level and like take care of her and stuff like that. But then anytime that she turns around, Remy's just doing that for her, but she doesn't love Remy, but Remy is like, I guess, good enough. So like she doesn't want to leave him, but she doesn't want to be with him because she doesn't love him. And then Remy is always looking for the girl that's gonna like sweep him off his feet and like force him to do crazy things and just be super energetic and always make him think and such. And every time that he looks for her, she's right there. It's Vicky. But he doesn't, like, Vicky and Remy, straight off, terrible people. Vicky is the worst. She's super annoying. She's super selfish. She's basically like, I'm tired of your stuff. We're going away. I'm done with this scene. I am above everything, and I'm also below everything because I have a really low self-esteem. Yay. I'm not going to tell you that, though. And then Remy is like, I don't care about anything. I'm tired. I'm just ready to go home, but I guess we'll do this now. Whatever. Like, they're terrible. They're terrible for each other. They're not even sure if they're dating anymore because they used to be super on and off, you know, and they can't really, they never really figured out if they stopped getting back together or if they stopped breaking up. So they're either dating or not. It doesn't really matter. They're just together. They like grew up together. They've been together their whole life. They can't imagine anything else. And they're just waiting for the moment when they realize that it was always each other the entire time. And that moment's never gonna come. They're just gonna keep on going to dumb nightclubs and doing the raves and missing college until they get kicked out. And then maybe they'll like get married or something. I don't know. I can't imagine a world in which anything good happens to these two characters because they're so problematic. But for whatever reason, their dynamic is just really fascinating to me. I think it's good if you have a story where you can find other stories in it, because like there's nothing really magical. I mean, there is something a little bit magical about their story, because obviously they're the children of like overseers, but they mostly are humans. I think it's cool because I'm able to like develop these characters and think about them and kind of give myself a break from all of Philip's stuff. But at the same time, Philip is like definitely a part of the story. Like, don't know if you noticed. It's easier, and then like once I'm like done developing their part of the story, I can go back to the main story and work on it. And like that's really the only advice I have for people that are like, how do you keep up with the same story? Like I have stories like Aftermath that I kind of just thought through to the logical end, and then I was like, well, there's nowhere really to go with this. Maybe if the concept had fascinated me enough, I could have been like, oh, let's think about this other character that was in this universe. What about this other character? What about the writers? What about the parents? And like I could have developed all these other parts of the story, but to me the story was really about Alpha and Master. So once I developed their story, I was like, okay, now I'm done. If you keep on skipping around stories and can't really settle on one, I would suggest just trying to, instead of focusing on one character or two characters and a story, find a story that you find the concept fascinating and then just work in a bunch of stories there. And then try to tie them all together. That was my mistake at first. I made all of these completely unrelated stories, and then it was like, okay, this thing happens and then this thing happens and then this thing happens, and that's really bad writing. You should never have this thing happens and then this thing happens. It should be this thing happens, so then this thing happens. So instead of this thing happens and this thing happens, it's this thing happens, therefore this thing happens. It's causality. It helps you write a plot, not a story. It's a whole thing. Maybe I'll make a video on it. Vicky and Remy are very much a causality of the story, so they still fit in like the whole overarching plot, but it gives me a break to think about them. And then I'll eventually go back to Philip because I want to get to their part of the story eventually. Even though their story is like in-game stuff, past in-game. Gotta get through the whole story if I want to get to Vicky and Remy. Also, about why he's named Remy. Whenever I was naming the grandkids, well, I mean, I named Vicky and her brother first, but the other grandkids, I named them after dead characters. Not dead characters, but characters that were part of the Overseers universe and no longer are. So, like, I brought back the name Gabriel from Philip's original children. Remy is obviously named after Remington, who I yeeted out of the universe. And then they have Frederick, who's also, Freddy used to be a character that his story no longer happens. Anyway, so that's why Remy's name is Remy. He is not Remy from the last scrap stories that I did. I'm just referencing all the scrap stories in this. Remy is a different character. He just happens to be named Remy because I still liked the name Remy. And he's not a bean like Remy. Remy instead of Remy. Gosh, that's too confusing. This is why I saved it for the end. Anyways, I hope you were able to take some sort of advice out of my ramblings. Like I said, like I'm not a professional writer yet. I'm not a professional artist either. This is just what I personally do as somebody who has had a story for nearly like definitely 5 years now, maybe going on 6, because I started this back in 2014. So yeah, I'm pretty good at keeping on the same story, but who knows what the future has in store for us. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!